He was 27 years old. He had a wife. He had a baby daughter who didn't know how to say his name yet. And in his pocket a flower his wife had given him. This is what he wrote in his last 2 hours. And this is what happened to the flower. My darling, au revoir. The true story of Captain Charlie May, Battle of the Somme, July 1st, 1916. At 7:28 in the morning of July 1st, 1916, Captain Charlie May was still writing. His hand moved across the page. The ink was fresh. The handwriting steady, the handwriting of a man who has decided to be steady, who is performing steadiness for himself as much as for anyone. 2 minutes later, he closed the notebook. He put it in his pocket. He climbed out of the trench. He was dead before noon. He was 27 years old. He had a wife named Maud. He had a baby daughter named Pauline. And in his pocket, beside the notebook, he carried a pressed flower, an Alexandra rose that Maud had given him days before on her last visit. He had kept it close. He carried it into the battle. Now let me go back. Let me tell you everything that came before those 2 minutes. Because those 2 minutes are only what they are because of everything before them. Who he was. Charlie May was born in New Zealand in 1889. His family came back to England when he was 13. He grew up in Manchester. He became a journalist, the Manchester Evening News. He was the kind of writer who could not pass through a day without finding its texture and its particular quality and the exact words for both. Not because it was his job. Because he was built that way. Because language, for him, was not a tool but a necessity, the way breathing is a necessity, the way water is a necessity. He was 23 when he met Maud. Bessie Maud Hall. He called her Maud in the diaries, always Maud, with the specific tenderness of a man who has found the name of the person he was made for and cannot say it enough without it meaning more each time. They married. They had a daughter they named Pauline. Pauline was very small when the war came. Small enough that Charlie, leaving for France, was leaving behind a daughter who would not remember him if he didn't come back. He thought about that constantly. He wrote about it constantly. The thought of Pauline growing up with a photograph and a name and nothing else, that was the thing that came closest to breaking him. Not the mud. Not the shells. Not the men dying in front of him. Pauline growing up without knowing him. That was the thing he could not make peace with. Enlisting February 1915. He enlisted in February 1915. Not in the first wave. Not in August 1914 when England had been swept up in something that looked like enthusiasm and was probably closer to the terror of being left behind. He waited. He thought. He had a journalist's instinct for the gap between what was being said and what was true, and the newspapers were not telling the whole truth about what was happening across the channel, but eventually he went. He became a captain in the 22nd Battalion of the Manchester Regiment. The Manchester Pals. men from the same streets, the same workplaces, neighbors beside neighbors, brothers beside brothers, friends who had enlisted together, who had shaken hands on the same street corner and said, together, then. Charlie knew his men, knew their names and their characters and the specific things about them. He wrote about them in his diaries. He cared about them with the particular, practical, daily care of a man who understood that his job was not just to lead them but to bring as many of them home as possible. He kept a diary, which was against military regulations. Court-martial offense. He kept it anyway. Because the alternative, letting all of this pass without language, without record, without someone bearing witness, was something his nature would not permit. He hid the notebooks in his uniform pocket. 7 of them. Small. Wallet-sized. Written on both sides of every page. France, November 1915. He arrived on the Western Front in November 1915. The trench he stepped into smelled of wet wool and mud and something else, something underneath both that had no name in the language of a man who had never been here before. Something the nose recognized as wrong before the mind could categorize it. He would learn to live with that smell. He would never stop noticing it. The mud was different from English mud. He wrote about it to Maud with the precision of a man trying to tell her something true. It has a character of its own. It is alive in some way. It finds the gaps in your boots before the end of the first day. It is in your food by the end of the first week. After a month you stop tasting it because it has become the taste of everything. He wrote about the rats. Enormous. Bold. Well fed. They run over my legs, my body, my chest and feet at night. They regard us as temporary tenants in their home. Which is probably the correct assessment. But he also wrote about other things. He wrote about riding. On rest days, sometimes, he took horses along the Somme Valley. He wrote about those rides to Maud with the tone of someone trying to tell her, I am still here. I am still myself. There are still ordinary things. He wrote about fishing. He told jokes in the diary, noting when they were good jokes and when they were bad ones. He had a journalist's eye for the absurd detail, the moment where the horror of the situation became briefly, inexplicably funny. He wrote those moments down with the same care he wrote everything else. Because Maud needed to know he was still him. And because he needed to write them to remind himself. Christmas 1915, the letter he didn't mean to write. Christmas Eve, 1915. He was in a dugout somewhere behind the lines. A candle. The distant sound of artillery that had become, by now, so constant it had ceased to register as sound and had simply become the texture of the air. He opened a notebook. He began writing to Maud. He meant to write about the Christmas dinner they had managed, something almost festive, something that resembled in the middle of everything a celebration. He meant to write about the wine and the jokes and a concert they called Whiz Bang Hall. He wrote those things. And then the pen kept moving. "I hope you had a happier Christmas than mine," he wrote. Not that mine was unhappy exactly, but incomplete. It is always incomplete without you both. He stopped. Then, Pauline will be walking now, I think. Or close to it. I try to imagine it and I can't quite get it right. I keep imagining the baby I left and I know that's wrong. She's not that baby anymore. She's someone I haven't met yet. The candle moved in a draft. The artillery somewhere shifted register closer for a moment, then further. He wrote, "I intend to meet her. I am holding on to that." He closed the notebook. He lay down. He listened to the artillery. He counted Maud's breaths, the way he used to when she slept beside him, and he would lie awake sometimes just listening to her breathe. Just that, just the simple fact of her. He fell asleep. Spring 1916. What was coming? By the spring of 1916, everyone on the Western Front understood that something large was being prepared. The logistics were impossible to conceal. The movement of men and equipment and ammunition. The particular hum of command activity. Something was coming on the Somme. Charlie wrote about it obliquely. He couldn't write directly. The censors, the regulations, the risk. But you can read it between the lines. The way he began to write about the future more carefully. The way certain entries took on a quality of inventory, as if he were cataloging everything he valued, making sure it was recorded somewhere in case the record was all that remained. He wrote about Maud's laugh. The particular way she held her head when she was thinking about something. Pauline's hands. He kept returning to Pauline's hands, the smallness of them, the way they had gripped his finger when she was very new. The way she would reach for things, that particular reaching gesture of a very young child, total commitment, no hesitation. He was writing them down. The way you write down the things you are afraid of forgetting. Or the things you are afraid of leaving behind without having properly named. June 17, 1916. The entry. 2 weeks before the battle. The 17th of June, 1916. Charlie May was sitting in the trench. It was morning. Not yet hot, but going to be hot, the particular quality of light that comes before summer heat, flat and full of promise that the afternoon would not keep. The trench smelled the way the trench always smelled. Mud. Wet wood. The cordite residue of yesterday's shelling drifting over from somewhere to the east. A man passed behind him. Boots in the mud. The specific sucking sound. Somewhere further along the line, a machine gun. Brief. Then silence. Charlie had his notebook open on his knee. He looked at the page. He had been trying to write about something else. About a ride he had taken along the river 2 days before. About the quality of light on the water. He couldn't write about it. His pen stayed still. He could hear his own breathing. The machine gun again. Further away this time. Then the low, geological rumble of artillery, so constant it was only noticeable when it briefly stopped. He pressed the pen to the page. He wrote, "I must not allow myself to dwell on the personal, there is no room for it here. Also it is demoralizing." He paused. He wrote, "But I do not want to die." He stopped again. Looked at what he had written. He could cross it out. He should cross it out. This was exactly the kind of thing a soldier writing a diary that might be captured, a diary that was already an illegal document, should not write. He didn't cross it out. He kept going, "Not that I mind for myself. If it be that I am to go, I am ready. But the thought that I may never see you or our darling baby again turns my bowels to water. I cannot think of it with even the semblance of equanimity." His hand was shaking slightly. Not from fear exactly, or not only from fear. From the effort of writing the true thing. From the specific difficulty of putting words to the exact shape of what he was carrying. He pressed his hand flat on the notebook. Steadied it. Wrote, "My one consolation is the happiness that has been ours. Also my conscience is clear that I have always tried to make life a joy for you. I know at least that if I go you will not want. That is something." Another pause. Longer. "But it is the thought that we may be cut off from each other which is so terrible, and that our babe may grow up without my knowing her and without her knowing me." He sat with those words on the page. Somewhere above, a lark. An actual lark, singing in the middle of the Western Front. He had written about larks before, the absurdity of them, the insistence of them, the fact that they kept singing over everything. He listened to it now without writing about it. Then, well, it's no good going on like this. Whatever happens, I am in the hands of fate, and all I can do is my best. The men in front of me have wives and families too. He closed the notebook. He put it in his pocket. He reached into his other pocket and touched the Alexandra rose. Maud had brought it on her last visit. She had pressed it into his hand and looked at him with the particular expression of someone trying to give you everything they have in one gesture. He had kept it. He touched it now. Just touched it. Then he stood up and went back to being a captain. The last letter. In the days before July 1st, Charlie May wrote a letter he hid inside the diary. He addressed it, "My darling, au revoir." He wrote, "It may well be that you will only have to read these lines as ones of passing interest. On the other hand, they may well be my last message to you. If they are, know through all your life that I loved you and baby with all my heart and soul, that you two sweet things were just all the world to me." He wrote about his men. About what he hoped for them. Then back to her, "If I am to go, I could not wish for a better ending than that which seems probable, swift, and in the midst of my men. But I do hope that it is not to be." He sealed the letter inside the diary. He put the diary in his pocket. He put his hand over his pocket for a moment over the notebook, over the Alexandra rose inside his other pocket. The two things he was carrying into whatever came next. Her words. Her flower. July 1st, 1916, 7:28 a.m. The morning was clear. That is the thing Charlie wrote in his last entry. It was a glorious morning. Summer in France. The kind of morning that, anywhere else, would simply be beautiful. Blue sky. Birdsong. The light coming in flat and golden over the fields. He sat in the trench and opened his notebook one last time. Around him his men were preparing. The sounds of it, the specific sounds of men making their final preparations for something they understand is about to be either the end of the waiting or the end of them. The artillery had been firing for 7 days. The theory was that nothing could have survived it. The German wire would be cut. The German trenches destroyed. The men would walk across no man's land largely unopposed. Charlie looked at no man's land. He wrote, "No man's land is a tangled desert. Unless one could see it, one cannot imagine what a terrible state of disorder it is in. Our gunnery has wrecked that, and his front line trench is all right." He paused. He had been watching something. All morning he had been watching something. But we do not yet seem to have stopped his machine guns. These are pooping off all along our parapet as I write. He looked at his men. He looked at the machine guns. He looked at the ground they would have to cross. He wrote, "I trust they will not claim too many of our lads before the day is over." 7:28 a.m. He closed the notebook. He put it in his pocket. His hand went briefly to his other pocket. The Alexandra rose. He looked at his men one more time. 27 years old. Journalist. Poet. Father of a daughter whose hands he had written about. Husband of a woman whose laugh he could still hear if he closed his eyes. He took a breath. "B Company," he said. "Ready." At 7:30 a.m., Captain Charlie May went over the top. The crossing. They moved forward. The British artillery lifted as the men rose from the trenches, lifting to allow the advance, lifting to not kill their own men, lifting at the precise moment that the German soldiers in their deep dugouts understood that the bombardment had stopped and emerged and found their machine guns and began. The machine guns Charlie had noted. The machine guns that had not been stopped. Charlie May and his men crossed the wire. They crossed the open ground. They reached the first German trench. Within 10 minutes they had gone that far. And then a German shell found him. He went down. Around him the battle continued, the roar of it, the smoke, men running forward and men falling, and the specific terrifying noise of a military engagement in full motion, unstoppable, consuming everything. One man stopped. Private Arthur Bunting. Charlie's aide. He stopped and turned and went back, and he crouched beside his captain. Charlie was alive. Badly wounded. His breathing was audible, the specific labored breathing of someone hit in the body, working for each breath, each one an effort. Bunting crouched beside him. He could not carry him, yet the fire was too heavy, the ground too exposed, the battle still moving through and around them. So he stayed. He pressed himself flat against the ground beside Charlie May, and he stayed there. An hour passed. The machine guns that had not been stopped were still firing. The ground around them was being torn up continuously, dirt and pieces of things, the specific random violence of artillery. Bunting stayed. He looked at Charlie's face. At some point he reached into Charlie's pocket. He found the notebook. He held it. He didn't open it, that wasn't his to open. But he held it. He found the Alexandra rose in the other pocket. A pressed flower, dry and fragile, still faintly holding the color Maud had pressed into it when she had given it to Charlie and looked at him with everything she had in one gesture. Bunting held them both. Another hour. The firing was beginning to shift, still heavy, still constant, but the patterns of it changing as the battle moved. Bunting looked at Charlie. He was still breathing. He was not going to survive. They both understood this without speaking it. Charlie's eyes were open. He looked at the sky. The same sky he had described as glorious at 7:28 that morning. Still blue. Still the same summer morning. A third hour passed. When it was possible, when the fire had moved enough, when there was a path, Arthur Bunting gathered everything and he carried Captain Charlie May off the battlefield. Charlie May died of his wounds that afternoon. Arthur Bunting sat down somewhere. He had the 7 notebooks in his hands. He had the Alexandra rose. He thought about what to do. The package. He found Maud's address in Charlie's files. He packaged the 7 notebooks carefully. He packaged the Alexandra rose. He mailed them to Manchester. To a woman who was already counting days. Who already knew, the way people know before they are told, that something had happened. The package arrived. Maud opened it. She saw Charlie's handwriting on the cover of the first notebook. She pressed her hand flat against it. She sat for a long time. Then she opened it. And he was there. Completely there, in the first entry, and the jokes and the description of the mud and the rides along the river and whiz-bang hall and Christmas dinner, and the word Maud written with that particular tenderness 200 times, Maud, 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 and the June 17th entry with the hand that had been shaking slightly, and the words about Pauline's hands and the thought of being cut off from each other. He was completely there. She read through the night. She read until the last entry. I trust they will not claim too many of our lads before the day is over. And then the letter. Folded inside the last notebook. My darling, au revoir. Know through all your life that I loved you and baby with all my heart and soul. That you two sweet things were just all the world to me. She held the letter. She held the Alexandra rose. Somewhere in the house, in another room, Pauline slept. Not knowing. Too small to know. Pauline. Pauline grew up. She grew up knowing her father through the notebooks. Maud kept them accessible, not hidden, not locked away, not treated as something too painful to be present. Present. On a shelf. In a place Pauline could go to and open and find him. His voice. His handwriting. His bad jokes and his good ones. His rides along the Somme Valley. His love for her mother. His fear of not coming back. His specific, named, recorded terror that she would grow up without knowing him. She knew him. She knew him through the words. The way he had known the world. The specific, irreplaceable way a writer knows the world, by writing it down, by finding the exact words, by refusing to let things pass without language. He had done that for her. He had done it without knowing if she would ever read it. He had done it anyway. Because some things need to be said regardless of whether anyone is listening. Because love requires a record. Because he was 27 years old and he was afraid and he kept writing anyway. The attic and after. The notebooks stayed in the family. Maud died. Pauline kept them. Pauline died. They passed to the next generation. 80 years. 2 world wars. The century that followed the century that had produced them. And through all of it, in the family, passed from hand to hand 7 small notebooks and a pressed Alexandra rose and the letter folded inside the last one. My darling, au revoir. In 2015, 99 years after Charlie May died, his great-grandnephew Gary Harrison published the Diaries. The originals are in the Imperial War Museum in London. In a museum dedicated to the memory of what happened. Charlie's notebooks. 7 of them. And the Alexandra rose. Still there. Still pressed. Still faintly holding the color Maud pressed into it when she gave it to him. The flower she gave him on that last visit. That he carried into battle. That Arthur Bunting held in his hand for 3 hours under live fire. That came back to her from the battlefield. That she kept for the rest of her life. That Pauline kept after her, that a family kept for 100 years because they understood the way Maud had understood from the first moment she opened the first notebook, that what they were holding was not just a diary. It was him. All of him. Everything he had. Given completely. Captain Charles Campbell May. Born in Dunedin, New Zealand. July 27, 1889. Died on the Somme, France. July 1, 1916. Age 27. Journalist. Poet. Husband. Father. He kept 7 notebooks. Against regulations. At the risk of court-martial. Because he could not write. At 7:28 a.m. on July 1, 1916, he wrote his last words. At 7:30 he went over the top. He was dead before noon. Private Arthur Bunting stayed beside him. For 3 hours under live fire. He held the notebooks. He held the Alexandra Rose. Then he carried Charlie off the battlefield. Then he mailed everything to Manchester. Maud kept it all. For the rest of her life. Pauline grew up. She read the notebooks. She knew her father. The way he had been afraid she wouldn't. Through the words. He wrote them for her. Without knowing. He wrote them anyway. My darling, au revoir. Just all the world. You two sweet things. Just all the world.